Okay. Looks like it's finally working. Okay. Saturday Night Live. Ridiculous. I'm not gonna follow President Obama or Pokemon Italia. Do people in Italy even play Pokemon? Oh goodness. Ingress and Pokemon Go app. Good for you guys. Okay. Let's just talk about reverse racism. I found 3 wonderful articles on reverse racism and why it doesn't exist, and a list of cases that supposedly give real examples of reverse racism. Oh, it's a beautiful picture. It's way too big, and you're gonna put advertisements on top of advertisements. Okay. As we wait for my computer to stop having a seizure. Oh my goodness. Go ahead and get rid of this. The computer needs to calm down. Hold on. You know what? We're just gonna go on without it. And you know what? I already went over the first thing yesterday, the first bullet point yesterday. I guess the intro yesterday. Oh my gosh, my computer's actually gonna give me a heart attack. Okay. But I never did look at what the tanning tax is. So many businesses offering indoor tanning services are required to collect a 10% excise tax on the indoor tanning services they provide. The provider must pay the excise tax to the government quarterly along with IRS Form 720. What? I don't see what that has to do with reverse racism. Whatever floats your boat, okay? That page is continuing to load. Oh, I shouldn't have clicked on that one too. That just messed everything up. I should have seen this was gonna happen. Okay. As soon as it lets me scroll here. You know, my computer is like garbage. Oh my gosh. One scroll at a time. So we entered the first one yesterday. Racism equals privilege plus power. And I want to go over this if I can. Oh my gosh. Wait for it. Wait for it. Oh no. Thought I could highlight it. Okay. Kinda. Racism is structural, not personal. I feel like for people, especially of color, racism is most certainly personal. I mean, like, whenever somebody says something to one black person, it's like you said something to all black people and their ancestors. And somehow it's okay to blame people now for how their ancestors treated black people hundreds of years ago. Like they're the same person, and they're not. I mean, it's like you get treated differently because people think your ancestors owned slaves just because of where you live, and they did it. And it doesn't, it's definitely, I mean, I'm sure in some instances it is structural, but I'm 100% disagreeing with the fact that it's not personal. I think it's everything to do with a personal problem with white people. Now, if I can scroll down again, oh my gosh. Anger is a legit. I'm gonna skip number 2. Scroll up. Let's just. Now that we have a reasonable number of tabs open. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna kill myself. Wait for it. Anger is a legitimate response to oppression. When reverse racism is flung around, it's often in response to angry language, protests, and fights for equality. People of color have been pushing back on privilege and power for a long time. Many of them are understandably pretty tired of it. Wait, I had to read this again because people of color have been pushing back on privilege and power for a long time. Many of them are understandably pretty tired of it. Then stop doing it because you're fighting a retarded fight. The issue doesn't exist. Privilege and power has nothing to do with race. There are plenty of people of color, not just black people, who have privilege and power, more so than a lot of white people. And I'm sure that if there were as many black people as there are white people, then there would be just as many privileged and powered people as white people. I mean, it's not this ideal that privilege and power is the only source of racism. It's not true. Many of them are understandably pretty tired of it. Unsurprisingly, some aren't interested in moderating their tone for a white audience. Yeah, they just want to fight white people. You don't want to have a legitimate debate. They just want to protest and yell in their faces. That means that sometimes they use strong language out of frustration. Come on now, out of frustration. Page unresponsive. Just wait. Out of frustration, rage, or to make a heavy impact on observers. I'd say that the only time it made a heavy impact on observers was during the Ferguson riots and during the Baltimore riots, and it's just they don't protest and do all the things that Black Lives Matter does out of frustration. They may say that, but they're a terrorist organization that wants to abolish the police and have black superiority over white people. Their main goal is to bring the downfall of white people. And if they were really about Black Lives Mattering, they'd be talking about the black on black crime, which accounts for 50% of the crime in the US and comes from just 5% of the population. So it's 9 out of 10 times not out of frustration, but it's definitely out of rage and to make a heavy impact on observers. Still not reverse racism. I will agree in most cases of protesting, it's not about reverse racism, but definitely with the recent cop killings, that's just plain racist. I mean, the one guy who shot the 3 police in Baton Rouge specifically said that he had a problem with white people, and so did the guy who shot the Dallas police. I mean, they had problems with the police, of course, but it was the fact that they were white police. You didn't see them shooting black police officers. The Baton Rouge killer did, but I mean, you didn't see the Dallas police shooter killing or even shooting at most likely black police officers. It's just ridiculous. Most importantly, insisting. I know the page isn't responsive because my computer is freaking retarded right now. More importantly, insisting that people of color need to be nice about the way they talk about racism is, in fact, racist. Bruh. Let me know that a white person wrote, if a white person wrote this article, that's the biggest L of 2016 for white people. More importantly, insisting that people of color need to be nice about the way they talk about racism is, in fact, racist. Because when it's a personal issue, it's definitely okay to lash out, commit murder, commit acts of violence, trespass, disturb the peace. Several different crimes are being committed just because Black Lives Matter. And to tell them that it's not okay to commit crimes and it's not okay to trespass, it's not okay to get loud, it's not okay to harm other people to get your point across, that's racist. Really? It suggests that, for example, angry black women don't merit social attention because they're being unreasonable. Well, anyone who's being loud and obnoxious and angry over any issue is definitely being unreasonable. I mean, no matter how big the issue is, I think it can be settled over a civilized discussion. And you're saying that telling black people they're uncivilized when this is how they respond to acts of supposed racism is racist. That's ridiculous. Now, if I can scroll down to issue number 3 here, which I don't think is going to be possible. Can I stop loading the page? Nope. Okay. Hold on. I bet they stole that image. I bet they didn't even take that picture. Oh, too far. Too far. Too far. Too far. Attempts to rectify systematic injustices are not examples of reverse racism. Systematic injustices. Oh, the word systematic is just thrown around way too loosely. There could be one instance of systematic racism, and all of a sudden, the entirety of the United States is suffering from a major problem from institutionalized racial injustice. And it's one of the not examples of reverse racism. One of the most common pieces of evidence used as proof of reverse racism is that of affirmative action and minority admissions at colleges. What? Universities and some companies. One of the most common pieces of evidence used as proof of reverse racism and that of affirmative action in minority admissions at colleges. Reverse racism is that of affirmative action. How is that a common piece of evidence? I keep rereading it because I'm trying to figure out what they're trying to say. One of the most common pieces of evidence used as proof of reverse racism is that of affirmative action and minority admissions in colleges, universities, and some companies. Is that a common piece of evidence of racism? Minority admissions. I mean, yeah, in order to look not racist, universities, when holding scholarship competitions, are gonna more than likely 99% of the time pick the people of color over the people who are white because they want to show that their school is diverse. And I guess you could put the point across that that's reverse racism, although I don't think that's a very big issue. And I think that's why we have these scholarships for people, specifically for non-white people, so that they don't have to fight over the normal scholarships. This is not the case. The problem is that generations of injustice have resulted in underrepresentation of people of color. This just goes back to the Ferguson riots. The people were protesting the city of Ferguson. I don't know who they were protesting. The people were protesting Ferguson. Maybe it was the city council that was 9 out of 15 black, or the black mayor, or the black police chief. But somehow all these people of color who are holding positions of power and privilege and are representing the citizens of color are being protested against for being racist towards their own. It just goes to show the stupidity and miseducation of the people who commit these riots. They see one act of injustice, supposed injustice, and they think it's their right to go out and destroy property and loot and set fire to the city because they're big a part of history and they're changing the world for the better. No. And the goal of affirmative action and related initiatives is to ensure that they aren't harmed by racial bias in admissions, because there's so much racial bias in university admissions in the US. That's just such a problem. When you rarely ever hear about racial bias in admissions at colleges and hiring decisions. People of color aren't admitted or hired over white people. They most often are nowadays. I mean, you could walk into pretty much any fast food restaurant, and the majority of the people behind the counter are black. And what does that say about their society? It has everything to do with culture. Any fast food restaurant, that is. They're considered equally with an eye to the fact that subconscious bias may be influencing decisions made by people in power who are, you guessed it, often white. I'm not going to delve into why that is because that's way too long of a discussion. But maybe if the black community tried to better themselves, I mean, if there was a proper graph that I could pull up to show you, white people are graduating high school in rates significantly higher than black people, and it's just like you want to complain about things you don't have and the things that white people have that you should have when you're not trying to get them. You're just going to complain about it until you're handed it to you. Like, it's not fair to the people who actually work for their achievements in life when some black guy comes up and they're like, well, we're trying to diversify our workforce. We're going to hire this black guy so that we don't look racist. Even though you do a better job, you're fired. Like, what? The world is a messed up place. Okay, where was I? White folks will tell me time and time again that affirmative action is unfair. White folks. Writes Jamie Ute. Jamie Ute. Let's take a gander at Jamie Ute. Oh, goodness. This guy was born and raised in western Colorado and says the word folks. That's offensive. As somebody who lives in the South, that's severely offensive. A diversity and inclusion consultant and sexual violence prevention educator. Oh my goodness. Because it discriminates against white people. Well, supposedly it doesn't. I don't really have an issue with this affirmative action thing because I feel like it doesn't do anything. I mean, it's not really helping or hurting either side. It's a case of them just not really trying to do their jobs. What the term fair assumes here, though, is that we live in a society where there's an equal playing field for all students, regardless of race or wealth. Addressing these injustices is intended to give people of color more opportunities and to ensure that future generations won't face the same imbalances current generations do. Oh my goodness. Future generations are going to be much worse than this generation. I say so many times that the millennials are way too progressive and way too liberal, and they're just annoying because all they want to do is sit around and protest when they don't get what they want because they feel there's an injustice to be solved. It's just going to get worse as generations progress. There's not going to be many conservatives in the future Having spaces set aside for people of color is not racist. Whites are often resentful of clubs, organizations, and groups focused on people of a specific race. These are not problems. Major problems, major points that you could use to justify racism. I'm talking about specific acts of reverse racism, not I've never met a white person in my life that's been mad that a club is focused on black people. You can just go to a different club with membership closed to people who are not members of that racial community. Dude, I've never met a white person that wants to go to a club full of black people either, and I've never met a black person that wants to go to a club full of white people either. So that's not an issue either. The claim goes that such groups segregate and discriminate. After all, what is this? After all, if members of those minorities cared so much about racism, they'd open their membership to all. That is true. Josh Odom writes in the Daily Collegian, one of my favorite examples of such a mentality is this. It's fair that black students have a black student union when white students do not. To put it simply, the University of Massachusetts is a white student union. You know we're going to check these facts. I don't think I spelled that right. Nope. Almost. The student body and admission statistics. Here we go. So 22,000 undergraduate statistics. 22,000 undergraduate students, 3,750 students of color. Students represent 21% of the total undergraduate enrollment. So they're not that much of a minority. I mean, when you're considering the U.S., when there's 320 million people, and about 20 million of those people are African American, which makes up about 15% of the population. And these people equal 21% of the population. I mean, they still have a huge voice and arguably a role in the school function. But it's about more than that. It's not just that every public space is open to white people, but that white people have an expectation. Every public space is not open to white people. Quite clearly, if this is such an issue, memberships are closed to people who are not part of the racial community. But that white people have an expectation that every private space should be open. No, we don't. We understand that there's spaces that don't belong to us and spaces that... You don't see us arguing that we should be allowed into the mosques and like nightclubs for gay people. I mean, we don't... You make us out to be these evil, jealous, everything should be ours people when we're not. Some conversations and community events need to take place behind closed doors. Yeah. For white people as well as black people. People of color may need to have sensitive conversations about discrimination, racism, and their lived experiences that are difficult to have when they're surrounded by white observers or people who talk over them. What? So suddenly they can't talk about race when there's a white person in the room. Why is that? Because white people have a differing opinion, and God forbid somebody argues with them, And white people don't just talk over other races because they discriminate against them. That's not a thing. We have manners. Such spaces provide a medium for doing so, just as members of the LGBTQ community use retreat spaces. That acronym is going to get like 15 letters longer by the year 2025, I guarantee you. Community use retreat spaces, and women join women-only organizations and groups for mutual support. Okay, women don't need support groups. What population of the world is gay? I can't believe that's such a top search in the world. Are women. The world, 6 billion. Oh, we're about to have to do this math, aren't we? Get the calculator out. Okay, so there's 6,895,889,018 people in the whole big world that we live in. You subtract 3,477 males, 477,829,638 males, and there's literally a couple million. What is that, like 50 million less males or less females in the world than males? We're practically 50-50. Women have just as, they're not a minority group, they have just as big of a population as we do. And in the United States, they make up 51% of the population. So they are the majority in the US, but yet the US is supposed to be the most discriminating place in the world towards women. Women's representation in select occupations. Oh crap. Really? Mm, 66.8 million whites in the United States. Well, in 1900, we didn't have all those immigrants that came to the U.S. during the Progressive Era, so it makes sense that almost 99% of the population was made up of white people. But yeah, in the United States, 51% of the population are female, so they don't need minority support groups. If they want positions of higher power, then if they want those CEO jobs, they need to get the education and go apply for those jobs like everybody else has to. I swear, if you're not a white straight male, you think you deserve special privileges. We're people too. We have problems. We're not just born with stacks of $100 bills in our right hand and a master's law degree in the left hand. It doesn't work like that. We have to work. We aren't just born with privilege. The history of oppression, white people are not oppressed. The history of oppression of people of color by the West and by extension white people spans centuries. Oh my goodness. Yeah, if you live in China, you're basically a black person when it comes to white people are the black people of China. If you're white and you live in China, or you live in Asia in general and you're white, you get discriminated against. They don't like white people at all. The only thing they hate, the only thing the Chinese hate more than white people are Japanese people. And there's this whole network of racism amongst Asians themselves. I think it's something like the people of darker skin don't like the people of lighter skin, like Asians, like Chinese people don't like Koreans, and Vietnamese people don't like Chinese. They have their own. That's what real systemic racism is. When you're hating your own kind. Mm. Yeah, white people are oppressed just in different parts of the world. I mean, you take a white person and stick them in some country like Somalia or Nigeria, they're going to get discriminated against because they're minority, and then people aren't used to having those kinds of people in their countries. White people are oppressed. Um, Oppression people of color. Africans were enslaved and brought to the New World, where the European colonialists stole land from indigenous people. Africans were enslaved and brought to the New World. Okay, Africans were sold to the Americans by their own tribal leaders. The tribal leaders would take anything the Americans would give them: gold, women, guns, anything the Americans would give them, and they'd sell their own people to the Americans into slavery. They would enslave their own people and sell them to the Americans. So the Africans are just as much at fault for the enslavement of their own people as white people are, where European colonialists stole land from indigenous people. I'm not going to talk about that today. Colonies across the global south brought untold wealth into the coffers of Europe, with the low cost of suffering for native populations. Okay, during the time that America was just a set of 13 colonies and we were still under the control of Europe, there was an equal number of slave plantations in the north as there was in the south. That was because the north had not yet industrialized and they still needed slave labor just as much as the south did. So blaming the south and only the south for slavery is not only wrong and miseducated, but untrue and offensive. Today, we're still living with legacies of colonialism in the United States. The black community is dealing with legacies of colonialism in the United States, really. The black community is dealing with the aftermath of slavery and the poverty of systemic prejudice it left behind. Okay, so slavery left behind poverty. Yeah. So because of slavery, which occurred 130 some odd years ago, you're poor and live in the ghetto today. Way to make the most of your lives. Come on, guys. In many African nations, the collapse of former colonies left governments in shambles and unable to support themselves. In Australia, indigenous people struggle with a high poverty rate and low access to health care. Well, you can't. Australians aren't normal white people. They have weird accents and they do what they want. And I'm not going to tell them they can't because they have to deal with some pretty crazy animals. I know they have like a spider that's like the size of a football in Australia that just goes up in people's houses. Like, I would freak out. Okay. White people, in contrast with people of color, do not experience systemic discrimination. Black people don't experience this crazy systemic discrimination that they say they do. And that makes it difficult to find and hold jobs, access housing, get health care, receive a fair treatment in the justice system, and more. When it comes to social disparities, they're the ones consuming and receiving the bulk of the resources because we go out and we get the education, we apply for the jobs that we want. We're in control of our own lives. We don't complain when other people have things that we want. And we don't say that it's because of our skin color when we can't get into a good college. There are plenty of black people going to Harvard. They just need to apply themselves, and they can do just about anything that white people can do. There are black CEOs and black business owners. They exist. It's not impossible. And just one example, black women in the US are more likely to die from breast cancer due to delayed diagnosis. That's the result of racism within the medical. No, it's not. Nowhere in that sentence does it prove that delayed diagnosis is caused by racial bias in the medical system. Maybe they just aren't going to the doctor. Maybe they're just less caring about their own hygiene and they don't go to the doctor. That does not prove there's racial bias in the medical system because the diagnosis is delayed. Maybe they just didn't want to be diagnosed. Two different cultures, despite the belief stated by some white people that they are more oppressed than people of color. That's not true. I don't think any party is more oppressed than the other. Their claims don't bear out when looking at social metrics like statistical representation in the judicial system, poverty, educational achievement, and unemployment rates. In cities that are the majority black or the majority African American, you'll often find that the mayor is black, and if there's a city council, the majority of the city council is black. In counties and cities, you'll often find that whoever holds the position of governor or mayor or city council is a reflection of the people that live under their jurisdiction. Like, you're not going to see a white person mayor in a city that's 99% black people. It just doesn't happen because the people vote for who they want. So there's only statistical misrepresentation in the justice system when the majority of the population is white. And in a lot of places in the US, the majority of the population is not white. Because black people like to clump together in their own communities, which is very understandable. Prejudice and racism are not the same thing. If I can scroll down. Okay, come on, we got 2 more to go. We can do this. 47 on Twitter, that's ridiculous. People need to stop tweeting. Okay, come on, number 6. We're almost there. Oh my gosh, are you freaking kidding me? Prejudice and racism are not the same thing. I agree. Prejudice is discrimination against anyone of any background. Racism is discrimination against a person of a different color than yourself. But that doesn't prove that perverse racism doesn't exist. Some people of color may view whites prejudicially. No wonder, given the interactions of racism in society, because there's such a huge problem with racism in society. No, you'll find if you look at statistics, there are the racism in the U.S. is very concentrated. It's not spread out. The entirety of the U.S. is not equally racist. There are are concentrated points. Like there's a website called The Counted, which lists all the statistics and the facts of police killings in the United States. And if you go to this website, you click on the map here, and you see where the majority of police shootings take place. Cities with the most deaths: Los Angeles, one of the highest crime rates in the United States, one of the highest black populations in the United States. And it's not even that white people are killing black people because they're racist. There's black cops killing black people just because of the way they look, because of the way they dress, because of the way they talk, because of the way they act, because of the color of their skin. There's black police killing black majority teenagers, ages 15 to 30. Racism is concentrated in the United States. And the majority of the United States is arguably not racist. This year, people killed in 2016, 633. Let's see, how many of that? (156 of 633 people black. August 1st, Corin Gaines, 23 gunshot. Police shot and killed Gaines during an hours-long standoff during which she held her 5-year-old son in her arms. The child was injured in an exchange of gunfire between Gaines and the police, although it is unclear whose bullet struck him. Police said they went into Gaines' apartment after getting a key from her landlord while trying to serve outstanding warrants. During the standoff, police shot Gaines before she fired back, according to police. Officers then opened fire again, striking Gaines fatally. I'm sure there's people out there who are going to say, well, Black Lives Matter. The police officer was white. She didn't even have a gun on her. It's ridiculous. There are black people killed by police that are justifiable. White people killed in the United States this year, 303, double the amount. I'm not even going to click on that because it was probably some drug dealer or something like that. So let's see how many of these people were unarmed. 26 people, 26 of the 156 black people killed in the United States this year were unarmed. Only two, the month of January, or the month of July. Police stopped O'Neill because he was allegedly driving a stolen car. Officials said that as O'Neill drove down the street, he struck a police car and a parked vehicle, after which 2 officers opened fire. A third officer reportedly shot O'Neill after he fled from the car. 3 officers who opened fire were stripped of their police duties while authorities investigate the shooting, and police officials have said the police officers appear to have violated department policy. I'd have to see the video to say for sure whether or not I agree with that. But I definitely think just for fleeing a stolen vehicle, you're going to shoot somebody as they try to run away from you. You should first try to chase them down, and you definitely shouldn't open fire on them just because they're hitting parked cars. But I mean, he was endangering the lives of innocent civilians around him. So I'd have to see what really happened to argue whether or not that was justifiable. But anyways, point proven. Racism, if it does exist in the U.S., is definitely concentrated and not equally spread throughout the United States. Okay. Anyone can believe in stereotypes or hold ideas about members of their groups that are not entirely accurate. However, being and behaving prejudicially isn't the same thing as racism. especially when such prejudice punches up, not down. What does that even mean? Punches up, not down. As Justin Simeon of Dear White People puts it, prejudice and racism are different. Well, they are different. A joke about white people dancing has no impact on the lives of average white people, whereas jokes about black people and reinforcing stereotypes. Oh, so you can say white people can't dance, and that's just prejudice, and saying black people can't swim is racist. Yeah, no. See, you took something that was true and made it untrue. I didn't see how that was possible, but you did it. Do have an impact on the lives of every. How? If you tell me I can't dance and that doesn't affect my everyday life, how is me telling you you can't swim affecting your everyday life? It's the same thing. Hard truths aren't racist. They're just hard to hear. Let me think about this one. Hard truths are racist. They're just hard to hear. Um, Black people commit crimes more on average than white people. It's not racist. It's just hard to hear. For every black person killed by a police officer, 40 black people are killed by another black person. It's not racist. It's just hard to hear. White people are graduating high school at rates almost twice the percentage of black people. It's not racist. It's just hard to hear. Black people are shooting each other in rates almost triple the percentage of white people are shooting each other. It's not racist. It's just hard to hear. It doesn't really work out, does it? Making a racist statement is a manifestation of racist culture. There's no such thing as racist culture. Being mean isn't. For whites, it can be difficult to be confronted with the reality. Crap. Scroll down. Confronted with the reality of scroll down. Confronted with the reality of racism and with comments from people of color about how power and privilege operate. Is tempting to take such comments personally and to insist that people of color are being mean, which is often hop, skip, and jump away from the accusation of reverse racism. Oh, here. In this case, the goal is often to invalidate the points made. If someone is being racist, surely her comments can be dismissed instead of taken seriously. What? In this case, the goal is often to invalidate the points made. If someone is being racist, surely her comments can be dismissed instead of taken seriously. Oftentimes, well, somebody being openly racist, that's a loaded accusation. Thus, a white person uncomfortable with a racialized conversation may claim it's reverse racism in order to escape the conversation. No, see, reverse racism is not a plea that the conversation is too hard to have, or the fact that I don't want to have the conversation. It's when I'm being treated differently because of the color of my skin. Or escape her own role in racist power dynamics. On the internet, where such conversations fly by at lightning speed, they really do, and often get heated, accusations of reverse racism often come in hot and heavy. No, they don't. It's worth taking a moment to back up and hit those commenters with a healthy dose of truth serum. Let's see, who wrote this? Ferguson, race, racism, and stereotypes are the tags for this article. Really? Oh my goodness. Freddie Gray was a criminal. Scroll back up to the top. S.E. Smith. You know he's a black guy. Oh, okay. Well, I feel like we've thoroughly gone over and debunked all of the lies about reverse racism, and I hope, if you are listening, this just goes to show you that reverse racism does exist, and unlike no, please, unlike racism, reverse racism is usually just black people complaining about wanting things that they don't, that white people do, because statistically white people will get better educations than black people, and it's not because black people don't get that. It's not because black people are discriminated against and they aren't given the opportunity. They have every opportunity to move to a better neighborhood, a better school, and work harder and get a better education. But they choose not to. Instead, they'd rather just sit there and complain about what white people have until somebody gives them that opportunity. So, I feel like we've had a full conversation in this live stream. So yeah, I guess I'll talk to you guys next time.